Howdy, howdy, y'all. It is the final I Am That episode because this is a special one. Obviously, once again, my homie, my main man here once again. But also, this is special because we're going to be doing something. We're going to be doing the last 2 chapters in one video. This is like a double feature thing. Just something cool and different. Figured, why not, right? Why not? Something nice for the last episode. So we're going to be doing chapter 100, Understanding Leads to Freedom, and chapter 101, The Nani Does Not Grasp Nor Hold. So how did you want to do this? You want to just kind of talk about both at the same time, one at a time? What was your thinking?
Yeah, like let's just
start
with 100 and
yeah. That's what I was thinking. Yeah. So with this one, this is definitely one of the most argumentative, if not maybe the most argumentative, I might argue, people like questioners that Maharaj deals with. Like because this guy straight up just compares. He just says, this is brainwashing. And he's like comparing it to like torture and stuff like this. I mean, I don't know how much of it is him just being, the questioner just being, just argumentative or whatever. But it definitely does seem like this one is much more resistant. Definitely one of the more resistant questioners. Because, like the entire beginning part is just him literally comparing, yogic practices to brainwashing. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, he gets really aggressive, and it's funny because at first he says, well, the similarities between brainwashing and yoga are, superficial. I'm sure there's nothing nothing to see there. And then later on, he takes it back. And he's like, they are not superficial. Yeah, and because he's
questioners do this. Like the last few I've noticed too. Like they will go as soon as because the way I feel like almost the way that Maharaj was able to like talk with people. Like sometimes he presses their buttons and you see like the hypocrisy in people just come out real quick.
Because he's, the weird thing about being a guru is you're basically, when you say you're a guru and like you take on that role, it's almost like people treat you like you're a messenger to God. So they're almost like arguing with you as if you were God. Like,
yeah,
why is the sky blue? Why is the grass green? Like just, and it's actually, I think, probably a very natural part of like just being on the journey to enlightenment is that getting kind of angry at the guru or frustrated with the guru. And I mean, I can definitely think of times where I like been very frustrated along the way with like people that were trying to teach me something.
Yeah.
And that's just a normal, because it's frustrating when it seems like it doesn't add up, but there's no logic to it, and it's all chaos. And it's like, well, yeah, that's the point.
Exactly.
That's actually the point.
That is very much the point. And I will say, kind of comparing these 2 chapters, one of the things I even told you before the video is that it's definitely because one of the metaphors I keep always using is like each of these chapters is just like hitting the nail on the head, and both of these chapters definitely do that. But they're really good too about kind of showing like slight differences that some of these chapters can definitely differ, especially in terms of tone and like the sort of conversation. Because these 2 chapters do feel very like this last chapter, like by comparison to this one of the things right off we'll say is they're not like the questioner doesn't seem as argumentative, just in terms of just the general vibe of the conversation. With this, with this one, like the 100, this guy's like very argumentative and just very. I want like one of the funny things, for example, is when the questioner says, I am not misusing words. When a guru asks me to meditate 16 hours a day for the rest of my life, I cannot do it without extreme violence to myself. Is such a guru right or wrong? Maharaj, none compels you to meditate 16 hours a day unless you feel like doing so. It is only a way of telling you, remain with yourself. Don't get lost among others. The teacher will wait, but the mind is impatient. And there's just something about like, And it is not the teacher, it is the mind that is violent and also afraid of its own violence. What is the mind is relative. It is a mistake to make it into an absolute. Like, I love how there's just something about how this to me is an example of like the questioner is just trying to keep further sass him and say like, no, it's this. He's trying to paint Maharaj in his corner, but he's very good about brushing all this stuff aside all the time. Every time someone tries to say like you're this or this is this, he's like, nope. He's like the ultimate sort of nope guy in a way.
Yep. I mean, at some point the teaching is just no, because it's just whatever is there, it's not you. And as it says in here, there's a couple notes I made about knowledge. Yeah. He talks about how you have to, in order to know anything, you have to accept it.
Yes.
And also kind of like he talks about knowledge. But yeah, I mean, once your only job is just to acknowledge what's there, and in order to do that, you have to bring it into your awareness.
Right.
But aside from that, it's just like, let it go. Neti neti. This is not me, this is not me, this is not me. Until you get to that deep silence that's beneath the waves. And I think it's in one of these chapters, I don't remember which one, but he talks about basically like there's no problem is ever solved completely. You can withdraw from it to a level which does not operate. So in a way, like all this meditation, all this stuff can be seen as like, well, we're just sort of trying to transcend our problems, or we're trying to go above them, or we're trying to not deal with them. But you got to understand, for somebody like Maharaj, with his perspective, he sees that each time you solve a problem, you get a bigger problem, a more complex problem. You get more problems. Every time a desire is fulfilled, there's another desire.
Yep.
And this is the way consciousness works. It's just going to bring you further and further in. So all you can really do is withdraw from it, get that detached awareness.
Take a step back.
And that's his position. You can't find peace within the mind. And it's very much the mind is what's creating most of these problems, or not all of these problems that people have. So there's no peace in the mind. Your only chance is to find a foothold outside the mind, and then basically stay there in this place that can at first feel, I think it's this chapter that he talks about it too, sometimes that state of detachment can feel empty or meaningless or whatever at first, but you have to just go deeper into it until you find the peace.
Yeah.
And that's the Zen message, and that's the message of Buddhism too. The Buddha said, the solitude that's so difficult to enjoy, the space of being with the self, and it's difficult, but if you stay in the silence of it, you'll find the peace that is in the silence underneath all the waves.
Exactly. Another point of this chapter, I was saying, I love everything you just said there. That's what's beautiful. Yeah. It's one of those things I almost can't even add anything to it other than just say yeah. But there's another point I found interesting in this chapter too, is how the questioner he's trying to use the fact that there's pain and suffering in the world. A lot of questioners do this. They try to use the fact that there's like pain and suffering. He try that almost as a gotcha to Maharaj and his teachings. Because this questioner, he says, it seems that we suffer so that we learn to overcome pain. Maharaj, pain has to be endured. There is no such thing as overcoming the pain. No training is needed. Training for the future, developing attitudes, is a sign of fear.
Yes, that's an important line, because this is the shift in perspective that happens to the jnani as opposed to the so-called normal person, is that there's this difference in time, and there's no longer, and Maharaj would say, like, preparation is a waste of time, basically, because, like, all preparation is avoidance behavior. It's all fear-based behavior. It's all trying to do something besides face reality.
Right.
And Maharaj is so good to be able to see that, and so many other people would not be able to see that, and he just goes straight to it and says
Yep.
like preparation itself, training for the future, developing attitudes. It's all fear.
Yeah.
It's all just not facing up to the pain, basically. Facing up to the pain that's there, you know. There's so
Exactly.
many things happening in each and every line of this book, you know. So many points being made.
Yeah, and he does a good job showing a lot of wisdom despite a very argumentative questioner. You can tell he's one of those like he's just constantly trying to paint Maharaj in a corner and trying to do it and trying to do gotchas.
Yeah.
Like throughout the entire thing. I mean,
And
even
he
that.
can't gotcha Maharaj. He's the
No.
one who does the gotcha. He's the checkmate. He's the
Yep.
verbal checkmate.
Yep.
That's this whole thing.
I mean, is there anything else you want to reflect upon with this chapter? I mean, this chapter. The thing about this, like in terms, there is the way it goes about it. I can understand why this is towards the end because it does feel like this content. I mean, even though the content, like ultimately the teachings, is all pretty similar of every other chapter. There's the way there is a certain. This does feel deep in a way. This chapter feels deep. You know what I mean? It does feel like one of the deeper chapters. I think especially just because
there's just a lot of ground being covered because the guy is kind of moving a little bit fast with his like what is love? What about love? What's lust? What is sin? You know, what's gonna set me free? You know, like
exactly
saying all these different things like.
Oh yeah, like are you also free from causality? Can you produce miracles? Maharaj, the world itself is a miracle. I am beyond miracles. I am absolutely normal. With me, everything happens as it must. I do not interfere with creation. Of what use are small miracles to me when the greatest of miracles is happening all the time?
Yeah.
Wherever you see it, always your being that you see. Go even ever deeper into yourself. Seek within. There is neither violence nor non-violence in self-discovery. The destruction of the false is not violence. And I love that because, yeah, like you said, one of the things he was trying to, like he was trying to, make this sort of like idea of like, yoga being like, just brainwashing and like almost violent endeavor in a way. And this is his way of, being like, no, it's actually even beyond the concept of violence and non-violence itself. He always does that. It's beyond this, like whatever, like,
because people are they're coming to him with questions that are
very dual
mental.
questions.
They're mental.
Yes.
They come from the mind. They're dualistic, yeah. And all he says is, well, that's generated by the mind, and the mind always does this. Makes everything into two pairs of opposites, and then it makes the opposites fight each other, and it just always does that, and you have to go beyond because you're never going to find any peace within the mind because the mind is always at war with itself.
Right.
And, yeah.
Yeah. That's a beautiful way. And so now,
the final chapter.
Yeah, and to get to that, because like I said, I think, like I said, that chapter, like it's like I think that's you did cover like why I think there's a deepness that it feels deep in a way, despite him just being so argumentative. But that's probably why. And that's because he's covering so much ground, and you see that in politics too. For example, people cover lots of ground when it comes to politics. They'll be like, "Oh, why about Israel and Palestine? Why about this? Why about that?" So that makes sense. That makes sense of why there's that sort of feeling. But Maharaj is just, like I said, very good, like making things feel deep despite all that. But like I said, for the 101, the final chapter, Nani does not grasp nor hold. I mean, I think that just makes sense of what Nani is. That it would be, being what they do or what they are in relation to it all. That makes sense. Yeah, they're not clingers because grasping, holding, that's the thing of clinging. That's being attachment, and that's when you only engage with such attachments when you are attached to being an individual singular being as opposed to one with everything itself, one with creation and beyond. Because Maharaj would say we're beyond that even. Well, what would you think about this particular, especially being the last chapter? I think I remember you saying early, like while we were reading, you said like, "Oh, I see why this is the last chapter."
Well, I think I said that because Why did I say that?
I,
Who knows why I said that? But yeah, it's a great chapter. Oh, I remember why. Because the earnestness. So the earnestness is specifically mentioned, and that's a big, huge part of his overall
yeah,
teaching. It's kind
yeah,
of the center of his whole teaching, the earnestness, and
awareness.
he tries to hint at this now. We miss it. Eternity is in the split moment of the now. We miss it because the mind is shuttling between past and future. It can be done with comparative ease if interest. To stop and focus in the now can be done with comparative ease if interest is aroused. What arouses interest? Earnestness, the sign of maturity. So, like, he's trying to point at this idea of, like, well, it's easy if you're earnest. It's easy if you have interest.
Mm-hmm.
It's another way of saying, what does this mean to you? If enlightenment doesn't mean very much to you, it's probably not going to happen.
Right.
It has to be something that you're. It's either you are destined, like Ramana Maharshi, you're just destined to be enlightened, and
Right.
you just when you're 16, you just like you become enlightened and become this huge guru, like, and you didn't even see it coming. It's
Right.
either going to be that, or it's going to be you have to have this sincere, genuine interest. For most people, it's going to be you have to have this really deep interest. And for some reason, that Maharaj is saying like that unlocks, like that's the unlocking of the door. Is when
Yes.
that earnestness is there, then the universe is like, oh, okay, okay, I can show you who you are. Okay, I can give you enlightenment. And it's just something about the way it works. And Maharaj is so good about going to the core of things and finding the real essence. And that's what he does with that earnestness thing. It's like,
Yeah.
this, you want to know the how of enlightenment? It's like earnestness, like having genuine interest, having sincere, steady interest and investigation and effort towards it. It's just very simple. It's very common
Yeah.
sense. And his whole teaching
Yeah.
is very,
Yeah.
very much about like common sense,
Very straight
normality.
to it.
Like he's almost like this is the way things should be.
Yeah.
This is normal. Like I'm normal. You guys are
I
the
mean, he
ones that
literally
are.
says that in the previous chapter.
He
Like at one
does.
point, he said, "I am the normal one of miracles and all that." Like I'm not.
I don't even need miracles, like
Yeah.
because everything's a miracle to me,
Yeah.
basically.
And what I found interesting too is like speaking of the earnestness, because the questioner literally says, "I find I am not earnest enough," and I find it. I like this. I love this quote. The way he responds. He says, "Self betrayal is a grievous matter." So he just calls not him, just not this individual not being earnest enough. He calls that just straight up self betrayal. But like that's betraying yourself by not even having this earnest. So that off the bat, I find interesting. And then it continues. It rots the brain like cancer. The remedy lies in clarity and integrity of thinking. Try to understand that you live in a world of illusions. Examine them and uncover their roots. The very attempt to do so will make you earnest, for there is bliss in right endeavor. So just like not only, but so that's what's nice. He says like, yeah, you're betraying yourself by not even being earnest, but you can get that earnestness. You have to just examine the world and see what is going on and see everything for what it is. And once you start seeing things for what they are, that earnestness will come through. And I agree with that because in my own experiences, as I do see this world as more of an illusion and see what things actually see kind of that deeper truth of what things are, I find that does bring me more, that makes me more earnest to pursue that path. And it makes me just not care much about physical pursuits and just like material pursuits. I just don't care about that stuff as much. I only typically care about it as far as it portrays to my spiritual endeavors, and pursuing these questions and this sense of I am and all that. Like,
and he drops a little hint right here, which is when he says, "The very attempt to do so will make you earnest, for there's bliss in right endeavor." So he's saying like, once you are on the right path, you will feel bliss.
yes,
and that will make you even more into it.
right.
And that's really true. I mean, it's almost like saying, well, I know you don't feel these things now. You don't feel excited. You don't feel blissful. You don't feel hopeful.
Right.
But once you're on the right track, and after uncovering the illusions and looking at things objectively, you will start to feel that bliss, and that will lead you into deeper earnestness. He's really
Exactly.
giving him kind of like a guide into
Exactly.
like how
I mean,
to be earnest.
exactly, and because he even says like because at one point Questioner says life is sad, Maharaj, yeah, Maharaj, ignorance causes sorrow, happiness follows understanding.
Yeah, like it's been said before. Maharaj speaks in sutras. That's such a good example. Sutra, like it's almost like a complete teaching just in one
Right,
sentence.
right.
Like
Oh, God,
ignorance causes sorrow, happiness follows understanding. That's like a sutra, like
he does. He's the king of those metaphors and sutras.
yeah.
Like, cause he's the king of metaphors and he's the king of sutras. That's a good point. I never even. I mean, I've talked about that, but I never put it like used the term sutra like that. That's smart. That's a good way of describing that.
Like his statements are just like these completely profound
Yes.
things that have like a completeness to themselves.
Yes, and each chapter is like that too. Each of these conversations are like that in themselves, and then he has moments, like that. Ignorance causes sorrow.
Well, each
happiness
sentence
follows.
really is.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
I mean, it's like
a lot of them are. Yeah, really are.
Each paragraph.
And but like I said, this questioner less argumentative, which I mean makes it less popcorn worthy, grabby. But a lot of times they can actually get deeper when they're not so argumentative and when they're much more just receptive and open. It lets Maharaj just get deeper and just talk more concrete stuff. So that's what I like about it. Because he's able to get more into his general waking state differs from deep sleep in the presence of the witness. A ray of awareness illuminates a part of our mind, and that part becomes our dream or waking consciousness, while awareness appears as the witness. The witness usually knows only consciousness. Sadhana consists the witness turning back first on his consciousness, then upon himself in his own awareness. Self-awareness is yoga. Like he can just talk about this this very deep. Because that sort of stuff is the hardest stuff for me to kind of wrap my brain around a lot of times. It's just what he's saying by that. Like that a ray of awareness illuminates a part of our mind that becomes our dream or waking consciousness, while awareness appears as the witness. So like I was saying earlier, like how you say, earnestness is like one of his center points. And I was saying like another center point would be to awareness. He's always talking about how
awareness and witnessing and detached awareness.
Yes.
Like being aware and just letting things be aware of it, but don't try to change it.
Yep.
Basically.
Yep. And I've felt that in my personal life a lot of times, like when I'm in those sort of states where I'm like aware of everything going on, but I'm just detached from it all. Yeah. There is something about that is very like, I do feel the most, that's when I feel the most as the witness, as this I am, those moments for sure. So
one thing I find about witnessing is like, it's so weird, is like it takes away the charge to all the desires. Mm-hmm. It's like if I'm not personally saying I am eating this cheeseburger, my desire is not engaged, and it's almost like the ownership of the I is not engaged. Exactly, and it makes it almost like you're sort of like indifferent to. They're sort of detached, and that's what he's trying to get to. And then he says, at first the detached or the it can seem like indifference or whatever, but you have to go deeper into it. Mm-hmm. And if you're ever in a state where you feel isolated and sterile and sort of small, and it's a temporary state, yeah. And it's just about that larger perspective.
I just love like another question here, like when he says, Maharaj says, you are God, but you do not know it.
Yeah, just very simple. Like you don't know your God.
If I am God, then the world I create must be true. And then I just like, these questioners always with their little gotchas or attempting. It is true in essence, but not in appearance. Be free of desires and fears, and at once your vision will clear, and you shall see all things as they are. Or as you may say that the Sat Guna creates the world, the Tam Guna obscures it, and the Raj Guna distorts it. You know, it's like if you just want to use those terminologies. Like I love how he's like he knows the terminologies, but he's like I don't care about these terminologies. Like that's one thing.
He's like, yeah, I know all this like ancient Hindu wisdom, but at the same time, I can make it even simpler by just telling you like,
he's always
do nothing.
Yes,
just
exactly.
Be.
Always focus, like trying to make the teachings as lean as possible.
I think the teaching, like the statement I've leaned on the most by Maharaj is just do nothing, just be.
Yeah,
because that it's almost like that's a way of just saying fuck you to the whole system of the gunas and just being like, all right, let these gunas just play around with each other, and I'm just gonna be detached and I don't give a shit. Like that's pretty much it.
And just the love, and I do say like the way he ends it too, like the last question, what is sin? All that binds you. I feel that to my bones. That's one of the that's a perfect. I love that. I do love that as an ending too in a way because like. Yeah, that is a perfect way of describing ultimately what sin is beyond just like a sort of like good, bad.
And he's also described sin. I remember in the earlier part of the book, he describes it as simply acting against your own knowledge, acting like just basically acting in a way that goes against what you already know to be true.
Yeah, like
I know that cigarettes are bad for me. That's kind of a funny example because he was a smoker, but
right.
But you know what I mean. It's a sin if you do something, if you repeat a mistake.
Yes,
it's because it's like it's not. You're not meant to repeat mistakes. It's okay to make a mistake. Don't repeat it.
Yeah,
basically.
It is. It's a beautiful sort of way because it's like acknowledging, like, yeah, you can like, because there's like sometimes when certain like disciplines when they're just like you can't do any wrong. It's like no, you could definitely do wrong, right? And he's establishing like this is the way you're doing wrong. You're just going against your this higher self, the true, like your pure self. When you go against that self, that is sin.
And Maharaj would say like too, like you already have pretty much enough knowledge of the difference between right and wrong and good and evil. Like we were all given that. Like
yes,
you already have this wisdom. You're just not like
engaged.
Just like
it
says in the I Ching. It's like it says in the I Ching. You have a well of water, but you're not drawing from it. You have the wisdom, but you're not living by it yet. But through earnestness, you will.
Yep, and you just gotta be aware of it. I'm trying to think if there's any other part I want to. I mean, like I said, this is once again another one of those chapters where we could go all day with it, really want to, but I'm trying to think. Well, is there any other parts of this you think you want, like any other quotes that are like pop out for you? You're like, oh man, I really want to mention this quote. I mean, like I said, I could do the whole dang thing, but
I just think it's amazing the way he is able to, he doesn't say lust is bad.
Yep.
He says it's a form of addiction.
Yep.
He goes right to the issue. It's like, whereas, we're always told with spirituality that, or at least it's been said, like, you must refrain from sin, you must refrain from lust, you must refrain from vice.
I mean,
but Maharaj will be like, this is why.
Yes.
I'm not gonna tell you not what to do. I'm just gonna tell you like this is why you should.
Right.
That this is why lust is basically an addiction. This is why sex is learned habit.
And what's funny is like one of my favorite Krishna quotes. He talks about how lust is one of the gateways to your self-destructive hell. Mm-hmm. And I think this is exactly why. It's because it is a form of addiction. So I feel like these are like two points that are like very complementary of each other. Like a lot of his, like especially with my own personal exploration with Krishna and whatnot, like Maharaj really complements a lot of Krishna. Like a lot of their wisdom, a lot of teachings are like complementary of each other, which makes sense given.
Yeah, it's basically an identical teaching, Yeah. Except there's a million different ways of like serving it up. It's like it's like Mexican food. It's all basically the same ingredients, but you're right. There's a zillion different ways of like presenting it or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. That was and this is exactly like the perfect way. That's like what each chapter does within the sort of way Maharaj teaches. That's what each chapter is kind of doing. And then like his teaching in relation to like these other sort of teachings like Krishna's teachings and Shiva's teachings and all this stuff and other gurus like that's it's also similar in that way too. Like it's all these like yeah, that's why I like it. I like exploring these wisdoms and I appreciate you, man, really getting me this book and
I'm just amazed at the journey that you've taken and that you really took it on and not only read it but also did like
this
whole review series.
It's been awesome. I love it. I'm kind of sad that it's going to be this is it, but we'll hopefully be doing more stuff with it. Maybe do some other videos. I don't know, or just do. I'll definitely do some other videos and some other stuff at some other point. So,
like I said, he does have a couple other books that are translated by other people, but there's also a million other gurus.
Right. So
who knows what
this has been a fun journey. Maybe do some live streams, reading some more chapters from this. I don't know. Whatever it is that people want, or they, or will be helpful for them. That's more important.
You never know what can help.
True.
Just put the best out there that you got.
Exactly. So, I think on that note, I will say, hope you all have an incredible day, an incredible life. I hope you all enjoyed this series. I enjoyed making it. I hope you all can gain something from it. And yeah, I think that'll be it. So, namaste to you all. And yeah, just
namaste.
Yeah, namaste. Peace, love, compassion, all that jazz.
All right. Been real, man.
Been real. Yeah. What you mean?